Hello everyone, this video is going to be about the new version 2.3.19. I haven't done a video since 2.3.12, so there's quite a few additions that I didn't discuss since. So let's get started. Okay, the first thing I'd like to talk to you about is defaults. So under the options menu we have a defaults menu. And this menu basically has 5 different file types. So we have the default, which is whatever you draw. This is what the graphic will be defaulted to as you draw it. Then we have the defaults for the placement line for applique, the cut line for applique, tack down for applique, and top stitches for applique. We have also added the ability to load and save the defaults file. So if I want to save what I have here, you'll get a screen where you can save the default file. You can also load that default file. And the reason this is important is that you might want to switch between different types of designs. You use different types of defaults for designs. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is some of the new options that we have been requested by those on the group page, and one of them was a measure option. So if you go under the hoops menu, you can see there's a measure button here, and basically it says on the taskbar here, click the starting point to measure. So we would click this, let's say, and then we would click here, and then it would tell us that it's 2.65 in the X, 1.39 in the Y, and the length is roughly 3. So that's been requested, so that's a new feature. Another thing that we added was an applique toolbar. So you can see down here we have some new toolbar icons. The one that we have here is an automatic. It will make duplicate and it will make applique. So when we select this graphic, pressing that, it's going to generate all the previous applique steps in the graphic that we want. And so we basically have the top stitches here, tack down, cut line, and then we have the placement line. So also we can do that similarly another way. If we go ahead and take this, we can make this the top stitches, and then if we copy again, we can make this, I have to select it, copy it, and then we can make this one, let's say, tack down, which is that. I had it well selected. We can make this one tack down. And then we can go ahead and duplicate it again. And we can move this up in the list. You can see why you want to use this auto button. Then we can make this cut line. And then we got one more step. We'll make this one placement stitch. So you can go and modify them later. All these do is set the graphic object to those different types, which you can do down here in the object browser too. This is just kind of shortcuts. Okay, the next thing I would like to talk to you about is satin line blunting. And so what that is when we draw a satin, I'm just going to draw normal satin, a normal automatic satin. So I'm going to choose automatic satin here. Notice how this point here is squared off. So what's happened in the past is that these used to be going out straight out, which would make extremely long lines and satin lines. And once you get a stitch length over like 4, 5, 6, and in these corners, it starts bunching up and just it won't stitch out very well. So what we have here is we have it automatically blunted on the end, and as this gets moved closer in, it goes back to a normal point. But when it goes on beyond a point where you're not going to get good stitching anymore, it switches to a blunted end. Now, when you stitch this out, it'll look like a triangle. It'll work well. So just notice that there's this new feature where it automatically blunts the satin line. So the other thing that I want to talk to you about is we have a new setting called inverse select. So if I have many things on the screen, let's say, and I really just wanted to keep this one, and I wanted that one selected, let's say, I could just do the reverse and it would switch between the two. And sometimes that can be useful. I find it useful for when I'm drawing things and I want to delete certain things, but I want to keep certain things. It becomes useful. Another thing I would like to talk to you about is the close option on the objects. When you close, now the start and end points will be merged in the case of Satin. So what that does is you can just move both points at once. And also the points become closed off. That's been there before, but the fact that they're locked together is a new feature. You can see the blunting taking effect. So that's that. And then the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is lettering. There was a request for the lettering to be thick. Some of the letters are thin. They vary in the store depending on which ones you get. Some of them are better than others as far as thickness. So we're just going to go to an area lettering and we're just going to type in lettering. I always use that for the example. And we have lettering now on the line. So in the case of this, these are fairly thick, but if we wanted to make them thicker, we could. I'm going to go ahead and make the spacing larger on this lettering so that we can get better understanding of how the thickness changes. So I'm going to go ahead and make the spacing bigger for the lettering. Alright, so we have some lettering here. Let's say that we don't like this thickness, we want it thicker. So now under the lettering feature, we have now new things. We have this setting for edge offset type. We're going to set that to scale, and what that does is we can scale and offset, we can stretch these zigzags by a percentage. So we got the inside that we can do and the outside. We generally do both the inside and the outside, but you can just play with that how you want. So I'm going to make the lettering 20% bigger, and I'm going to do the same thing for the inside. Make that 20% bigger too. And you notice when I click this away, the lettering gets bigger. It's because it's a touchscreen, it's kind of hard to show you, but you can see that this letter is now thicker because I added these offsets. So let's just be a little ridiculous and make it really big so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So we're going to do 4, and there we go. You can see here, you can see the underlay doesn't get adjusted in this current version. I might make that in later versions, I'm not sure yet. But you can see that it's offset from that point. Now I made the inside bigger than the outside, so you can see it's offset to the point. But if the effect is that it actually makes the lettering thicker. Now all lettering doesn't work that way that well necessarily, because you can see in the case of the T, these don't get longer, so they might just actually disappear depending on how thick you go. But that's not really probably going to happen that much because we essentially have made the letter twice as thick. So we probably don't want that. We can go ahead and make it just 10% on each side which essentially makes it 20% thicker, and that probably will work for what we need to do. All right, so also in here we have exposed. Now, I just wanted to mention these variables are available when you do Satins, so I don't know if anyone's played with this, but basically they've just been exposed for the lettering feature. Now, another thing that we have here is we actually have the Satin exposed too. So if we want to go ahead and make the lettering coarser, so I'm going to go to 6 instead of 4, you'll notice now the lettering's coarser. And so, you might want to have that effect, or you might want to make the lettering denser. Generally, more than 4 is probably not a good idea, but you have that option. You can play around with it. On everything you do with EmbroideryWare, it's always a good idea to stitch out stuff on your screen. You should stitch out stuff on your machine. You should be working on your machine as much as you're working in EmbroideryWare to understanding what does and doesn't work. And the last thing I would like to talk about is random. So if you change scale to random, now the lettering will be randomly oriented. So basically, that can create some neat non-uniform effects, and you can do that with any of the fonts, or any of the letters, I should say. Um, so random basically randomizes how this spacing goes.